Another thing I actually wanted to discuss with you is a George R. R. Martin related thing. So during the book, George R. R. Martin is quoted several times, but one thing I did notice is as the book goes on,
Uh-huh.
there's less and less George being interviewed for quotes and whatnot.
So are
Some of the
the
thing,
is the early chapters about the early seasons and the later chapters about the later seasons?
Yeah, one
Okay.
thing I did notice is that season six doesn't get that much attention, thank fucking Christ. However, there are chapters dedicated to the penultimate episodes of the first three seasons, specifically Baelor, Blackwater, and Reigns of Castamere, which is Neg's execution, the Battle of the Blackwater with Stannis, and the Red Wedding. So certain things like that get their own chapters. Even the Sand Snakes and the Dornish plotline also get their own chapters.
Oh, really?
And yeah, apparently Sorella Sand was supposed to be in the show, but they cut her out because they had too many characters. Funny enough, there's an entire chapter of the Dornish storyline, and Alexander Siddig, who some people would know as Dr. Bashir from Deep Space Nine, he played Duran Martell. There's no quote or mention of his character or the actor anywhere in here.
Huh, because I know he was pretty disappointed that he was underutilized.
Mm-hmm.
Different interviews I've heard him say like, well, they didn't really use me. Huh.
Basically, and but yeah, no, certain chapters have that, but in the earlier chapters, George is all over, and he gives his approval and disapproval a couple of times. Their execution of certain scenes from book to show, and oftentimes he'd wish he'd done it the way Dave and Dan did it, citing Ned Stark's execution as one example of where they did it correctly, if you
Huh.
can like believe that. Um, George is quoted
I
as
mean, I
saying,
will I will say that the first time I read Game of Thrones, I was confused because Ned's death doesn't happen in Ned's chapter. So like you're confused like it's in Arya's chapter and so you're kind of not understanding what's going on because there's a lot going on in the crowd and you're like, wait, is Ned really up there? While in the show, you're up against Ned's face. I mean, Arya's in the distance and she's kind of watching things from afar and you're not really understanding what's going on. While in the show, it's pretty clear Ned's dead, you know?
"Mhm."
So I can understand that a little bit.
Well, actually, what this is a quote from George himself, and he says, "I have an ego. Normally, I like things done the way I did it, but Dave and Dan improved that scene." Talking about the execution. In the books, Ned doesn't say anything or see Arya there, and it's purely coincidence that Euron finds her. It's a lovely moment. I wish I had done it that way, the way Dave and Dan did. The death of Ned Stark could not have been done any better. So this is him basically praising Dave and Dan with how they did Ned Stark's execution because he liked that Ned was able to see Arya next to the statue of Baelor and, says it out loud and Euron catches her there and, they have that moment where they see each other. And
Yeah.
George really liked that.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But I will say that George likes praising really tiny things, like really specific
Well,
things.
here's another example of that. So there's one scene that really impressed George and gave him a lot of comfort when he was first like viewing the first scenes from season one, and that was the scene between Arya and Ned, where Ned tries to tell Arya that someday she'll be a lord's wife and live in a castle, to which Arya says, "No, that's not me." This is
Yeah.
one of like the first finished scenes that George ever saw, and he really liked it like quite a bit. Like he's quoted as saying, "It was straight out of my imagination and it was perfect. The dialogue was wonderful. It's not a hugely important scene, but it was important to me emotionally. I thought that was once I saw that I thought I could relax, that they were going to do a great job on this, that it was my book come to life." End quote.
I mean, to be
So,
fair about that scene is a steady cam with um, just Sean Bean acting really well. I mean, I don't know how much is Dan and Dave on that. Like, that's just you give Sean Bean like, some screen time, and he's going to execute the lines correctly. And I don't know, and Maisie Williams was fine in it. She did a good
mhm.
job too. So, um, yeah, for some reason, Maisie Williams seems like an actress that was like better in the early seasons than the later seasons.
You noticed that too, huh? You
Yeah.
noticed that too. Yeah, me too. I noticed that as
She's like,
well.
it's weird. I mean, this is not unheard of. People talk about how Corey Feldman was a really great child actor. But as he gets older, he's just an actor and not an exceptional one. But as a child actor, he gets those, because children have different emotions and different reactions to things than adults do. And so, he got that down. Maisie Williams was not that I think Maisie Williams, like I've seen her in other things. She's not a bad actor in any respect, but I think she was better relative to everybody else when she was young, Mm-hmm. I think the same as the Bran actor too.
Oh, yeah, I would kind of agree on that. For me, the worst example of a child actor in a show I actually liked was Sons of Anarchy. Jax's sons, as they grew up, they kind of got really cringy and just. I hate child actors in general. Honestly,
that's what I'm saying. Like a good child actor is really tough to find, and the fact that Corey Feldman was so good at it, and then just becomes a whatever adult actor, so. It's why, and then some are really great child actors and then become really great adult actors too. Like Christian Bale was an excellent child actor, and he's an excellent.
Really, what did he do when he was younger?
He did Empire of the Sun.
I don't even remember that.
Oh, it's him, John Malkovich. They're in a Japanese prison camp. The little British boy, he's living in Shanghai, and then World War II happens, and so the Japanese take everybody to a prison camp, and he's separated from his parents, and it follows him. But it's he's a little kid. He's like 12.
What you said makes a lot of sense. That's why I fucking see the kid from Stranger Things in everything. The kid Finn Wolford or whatever his last name is. Yeah. I see him in everything. He was in It. He's gonna be in the new Ghostbusters film. Yeah. He's in fucking everything.
No, and he's excellent because there's a certain awkwardness and awe and wonder that children have that it's really hard for adults to recreate. Adults just don't have those same emotions. Like, becoming really excited about various things, being embarrassed at your own emotions, like not being able to look, and having to look away. All these little things that children do that adults don't. That you have to kind of get. And then I don't know if a child actor is able to, communicate that, it's fantastic. But
the other thing that George praised was the Red Wedding stuff. According to him, they pulled it off correctly. They picked perhaps the most brutal scene I've ever wrote and made it more brutal. They dialed it up to an 11. And I have to disagree and kind of agree with George in a sense. Like, brutal, yes. Like, watching Black Walder stab Talisa, Rob's wife.
Yeah.
His pregnant belly. Brutal as fuck. I completely agree. But what I've always disliked about the Red Wedding in the show is the stuff that they cut, right? So, in the books, correct me if I'm wrong, the Great John Umber, he puts up a fight.
Yeah, everybody puts up a fight. Yeah.
All the Northern Lords who are in the scene put up a fight. In the show, they're easily dispatched, which, okay, fine. Like, Grey Worm, at one point in the books, he's let out by, I believe, Jane Westerling's brother or someone, and he takes out a couple of Freys before he's eventually put down himself.
Yeah.
So, I get it. I disagree that it was a very brutal scene, but at the same time, I would have liked some defiance from the Northern Lords instead of them just being, taken out very easily. That's what I would have liked personally.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. There's a lot of these little plots. Like the Red Wedding, as they portray it in the show, is a smaller affair. And I don't mean number of people. I mean, like, the amount of characters and the amount of events going on. It's a much smaller affair. You're really focused on Catelyn. And what's strange is there's a few other people that you're kind of focused on, like Walder's wife, Roose Bolton, and things like that. But there's a whole, pantheon of characters in the book of things going on. I will say that one thing I think the show did better is they brought the audience to a place of comfort before yanking the surprise on them. I think the book, you're more distrustful and you're not enjoying yourself at the wedding. Like when Catelyn's describing the wedding, it's crappy food and all of these creepy people doing creepy things, this and this character dancing with this and this character and she's already described them as characters you don't like, and or people you don't know dancing with somebody else you don't know. And in the show, there's all these little touching moments where the music's playing and everyone's having a great time, and Rob gets this news that I'm forgetting when Talisa tells I guess she must have told him earlier that she was pregnant, but Rob and Talisa are having a great time, and there's more focus on Edmure being like, the tension is Edmure's wife going to be good looking? And then she's beautiful, and you're like, oh, everything's going to be great. And you're like, oh, I had all this tension that there was going to be a bad situation, but now it's all a relief, and Rob's having a good time, and Talisa's having a good time, and then the rug is pulled out from under you. I don't think you ever get that feeling in the book. In the book, it's a bunch of creepy people acting creepy, and you don't really feel Edmure's tension of like, oh my gosh, am I going to have an ugly wife? And then, oh, what a relief. Like, you're not on that roller coaster. And so I will praise the show in that respect, that it catches you off guard more. It takes you from a fun, nice memory to a horror really quickly. Unlike the book, which is just a weird situation to a horrible situation, which is, not much of a fall.
Well, there are things that George didn't like at all, and since we're on the topic of weddings, Daenerys' wedding in season 1. George strongly disliked the change in how it was done in the show, and I'm being generous here when I say strongly dislike, and the criticism here is that her first time with Drogo was essentially sexual assault. Yet in the book, it was vastly different, where, it's consensual apparently, and Dave and Dan actually defend their decision to change it to the show, and they're quoted as saying, "Here's a girl who's absolutely terrified of this barbarian warlord she's being married off to. It's the last thing in the world she wants, yet somehow, by the end of this wedding night, she seems to be in a completely joyful sexual relationship with him. It didn't entirely work for us." I got to agree. It's just, going back into the book, it just seems a little weird that all of a sudden, all of it is completely okay, which, I don't know. I don't think that would have sit right with the audience as well.
So it's odd. So the book, it's almost like in the show they just cut the first sexual encounter, which actually doesn't fit with the rest, and then just continued on from there. So in the book, the very first sexual encounter between Daenerys and Drogo, all of a sudden, without much explanation, because prior to this, Daenerys has been a pretty timid girl. And then all of a sudden, she's very scared as Drogo approaches her. And then all of a sudden, she's like, yes, and is like willing to have sex with him, kind of out of nowhere. There's some fairly intimate descriptions of where hands are going and such. And then after that, they jump to Daenerys having an unsatisfying, sex life where she's, being the object that Drogo kind of has sex on, much like the show is showing. And then she learns to, Daria, teaches her some moves, and she learns how to shift things around, and it parallels. So I understand why Dan and Dave did what they did, because, whatever's going, I mean, if I were to explain the scene from the book, I would say that there was some sort of mind control from Quaithe going on that all of a sudden made her want to be super sexual on her first, wedding night at the age of 13.
Mind control from Quaithe. That's a turn.
Well, I mean, we know Quaithe has been doing mind control on Daenerys. Like, that's not too much of a surprise. But it's whether or not various moments in Daenerys' life were mind control. She's having these weird dragon dreams from fairly early, but did it make Daenerys into a sex monster on her wedding night with Drogo? I don't know, but her first wedding night is a little out of character for Daenerys based on what we see later, and it's a little out of character for a 14-year-old girl or a 13-year-old girl on her wedding night. So it's all a little weird.
Well, this is one of those like moments where I gotta disagree with the original source material and
Yeah.
George on this because I agree. Dave and Dan made it more realistic in a sense, considering we do
Yeah.
have actual first-hand accounts of people being forced into marriage with people they don't know and don't like. And I guess the lucky ones are those who grow to like the person and adapt to the situation, but that's not usually the case.
Right. And that's the funny thing about, I mean, and I think George R. R. Martin makes this comparison in his writing, but like arranged marriages where you're having somebody having sex with someone that they would not have sex with otherwise. You know, you're coercing someone into having sex with somebody else outside of their own desires. Like that happens in arranged marriages. Like, you know, it might not be officially rape, but it's in the same category. Like you're being forced into sex that you don't want to have, you know? And that's what arranged marriage is. It's sex that you don't want to have with someone that you don't want to have sex with. So it's a little odd that actually, you know, George R. R. Martin had such a negative reaction to Dan and Dave's like interpretation, because Dan and Dave's like what they put on screen is more realistic than what happened in the book. Absolutely. And which is why I have to justify like Daenerys' actions with like mind control, because it's not what a human being would do. Um,
Well, according to George, and this is a quote from him, why did the wedding scene change from consensual seduction scene to the brutal rape of Emilia Clarke? We've never discussed it. It made it worse, not better.
hmm.
That's his thoughts on it. I gotta disagree with him on that.
Yeah, I
Um,
disagree with George too. Like seduction, okay. Like
Another thing that George didn't like, and I gotta cheer him on with this, is I'm gonna quote him again. Is in regards to Littlefinger. He says, "My Littlefinger never would have turned Sansa over to Ramsay. Never. He's obsessed with her. Half the time he thinks she's the daughter he never had, that he
hmm.
wishes he had if he'd marry Catelyn. And half the time he thinks she is Catelyn and he wants her for himself. He's not going to give her to somebody who would do bad things to her. That's going to be very different in the books. To defend Dave and Dan here a little bit,
Yeah.
Littlefinger even said so himself in season 5. He doesn't know Ramsay. So the best he could do is try to get Sansa away from the Vale because people in the Vale
Yeah.
could sell her out to the throne. So I get it.
I mean, I do get it too. I think what's weird is that Littlefinger is offering Sansa up to anyone else that would deflower her and have sex with her. You'd think he'd be a little more possessive of her, but in the book he's trying to do it with Harry the Heir. So I don't even, you know, I can't justify that. Like I would say
Well,
that
in the
like
book, her identity is concealed, whereas in the show, I believe she tells the Lords Declarant who she really is.
yeah, but I'm saying that like okay, Littlefinger's obsessed with Sansa. And when you're obsessed with someone and you're possessive of them, do you want to hand them off to anyone else to be for sex? Like no, like and so I think but that's just a weird contradiction in the book unless Littlefinger doesn't actually want Sansa to have sex with um, Harry the Heir or whatever. But um, so, you know, would he give things over to Ramsay? Well, in the same way that he's giving things over to Harry the Heir, sure, I guess, if you're being consistent with the book. Though, again, I think it's a little inconsistent with Littlefinger's character, and this is a criticism of, you know, George R. R. Martin. But and then he didn't know Ramsay was going to hurt her.
Hmm.
Um, Now, is it in Littlefinger's character to not know information about Ramsay? Isn't Ramsay a little famous for being a complete bastard? Shouldn't he have done some research? Shouldn't he have had a spy, like collecting information first? I don't know.
So, in the books, Ramsay is famous because he's going around terrorizing people in the North. But is the
Yeah.
Ramsay in the show doing that? That's where we get the
Yeah,
disconnect.
that is. You know, if they, you know, kind of how when they introduced Joffrey, it was kind of a secret to everyone that Joffrey was a piece of shit, right? Like that's not revealed for a little bit. And so, you know, you can accept that he's like this little gentleman character. Maybe if they'd
Hmm.
established that Ramsay was a little better at that. The problem is when, and I'm going to butcher Ramsay's actor's name, so I'm not even going to say it. But the actor plays him as so disingenuous. Like when he's nice to everybody, it's so obviously faking it, right? Like he's not good at being a gentleman, you know? He's like he pretends, and it's so obvious that he's pretending, right? So
But it adds to the character.
it does, but would anybody be fooled by it? You know, like would anybody be
Nah,
fooled? And think that
I think so.
Ramsay...
People are
I
dumber than you think.
I guess Fat Waldo was fooled at first,
Hmm.
so I don't know. But had they presented him a little more, better with the deception, somehow Ramsay tricking Littlefinger, and that would have added to Ramsay too. That like Ramsay is super smart. You know, he's smart enough to trick Littlefinger. I think that, I think had they spent some time, I think they could have pulled it off. But I do agree that it seems it was off that Littlefinger would be stupid enough and careless enough to pass Sansa off to Ramsay.
And George's least favorite scene in all 8 seasons, can you guess what it is? It's the most ridiculous complaint I have ever heard of anybody.
So you're saying it's
lob at
going to
Game
be
of
really
Thrones.
hard to guess.
Okay.
Hatred-
I'll just
Well,
just
hold
go
on,
ahead.
hold on.
It's a season 1 thing.
It's a season 1 thing.
That's exactly what I fucking thought.
Hold on.
It's a scene with Renly.
Season 1 Renly, they didn't give much screen time to. I mean, was he just banging Loras or something in some scene? Like the fellatio scene?
No, apparently George R.R. Martin's least favorite scene. He really didn't like the Daenerys thing, but apparently this was
all 8
also
seasons,
his least favorite was King Robert's hunting scene in season 1, where he and Renly and Barristan are the only ones on screen. George was not satisfied that there weren't an entire array of people with them. In George's own words, a royal hunting party would include a plethora of things, such as dogs, guards, huntsmen, pavilions, and so on. So...
Okay. I mean, I guess it wasn't very realistic, but yeah, they were trying to save some money. And I don't know what a hunting, I mean, I guess I've seen like hunting photos where there's a million dogs and a dozen people on horses.
A royal hunting party, I guess, but at the same time, for it to just be Robert and Barristan, I think that would be in line with the Robert character not wanting like this entire like array of people with him. It just wants to be him, his spear, and the animal, and that's it.
And here's the other thing, and this is to defend D&D here. If you have this massive hunting party and Robert is just drunk, you'd think that somebody else besides Barristan would also like come in and also try to defend against the boar and all of this. Like one of the things about Barristan feeling guilty is he felt like he was the only person that could have saved Robert and he didn't do it. If you have like 100 people like just sitting by and they all fail to save Robert, and it just seems weird that a boar would be attacking when there's 100 people standing around. Don't you think the boar would kind of be scared?
Right.
With all these barking dogs and all these people, like, I don't know. I mean, I understand maybe it's realistic. That's how hunting parties were, but I can understand that, like, for the kid, like, little things like would Lancel feel confident about continually feeding Robert strong wine with 100 eyes looking at him constantly? Like you'd get nervous, especially the way they portrayed season 1 Lancel as this like nervous guy. I can understand why they did it with only a few people. Not to mention you're saving money.
The only thing Barristan has really anything to feel guilty over, which I could understand, was didn't he always feel guilty over not unseating Rhaegar during the tournament at Harrenhal?
Not winning, yeah. He was like, oh, if only I'd won.
Mm-hmm. Would have prevented the deaths of everybody and so on and so forth.
I would have named Ashara Dane and she would have totally been into me. This like old Kingsguard virgin, This is...